Hey everybody, welcome back to the collective. We have some pretty cool people here, that are on their way apparently, and that we'll get them sorted out as
Oh,
soon as
so
we
does that
possibly
mean
can.
we're not cool?
Not really,
What is
not at
even
all.
going on?
Yeah, you guys are just normal to me now.
We got to wait for the cool people to
You
show
gotta wait
up.
for the cool
What?
people to show up.
Wow, I feel like such an underperformer.
Well, I mean, I wasn't gonna say it, but
Thank you.
That's
Thank
what
you for
she said.
highlighting that.
So yeah, Seb, man, how's it going? We haven't seen you for a while. You just finished up some schooling, right?
I'm good, boys. Yeah, well, actually, I'm not finished. I was still working on this a half a second before jumping on live here.
Nice.
It's because it never ends.
Exactly. Well, it won't until September. Well, actually,
That's right.
October. Putting the paper in October, and then it's a wrap after that if everything goes according to plan.
Where are we going to buy that?
The paper?
Yeah.
Oh, there's nothing to buy. It'll be available. Any research paper that's peer reviewed is generally available.
But I want to buy it. I want to have like a hardcover copy.
Got to get that
a signed
I put
copy.
it up on my
copy.
bookshelf.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. I mean, if you're gonna look for that, what is that? First edition that
Oh,
Jocko always talks
Signed.
about. Signed first edition, right there.
I'll get you a signed copy, Sean.
Yes, you will.
This
Yes,
is
you
the type
will.
of person I am.
Yes, you're the
Selfless.
man.
Selfless.
Yes,
Yeah.
team player.
Team player. Awesome. Well, we could dive into the conversation while we wait for Alan. Oh, there
Straight
he is.
into the
Perfect.
deep end.
Boom. Look at that.
Oh,
There we go.
Oh, look
brother.
at that. Fantastic.
How's it going?
How you doing, gentlemen? Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, man. No worries. We're here to talk about some cool stuff. So we know what we're gonna dive right into it. I'm gonna throw you into the deep end because that's what I like to do.
Burls.
I know, right? So we were talking. This happens to us quite a bit, actually. We call it green room gold, where Shaun and I usually end up talking after we wrap, and then we have all the really good bits and pieces, and we get into really deep conversations. Then we go, oh, why didn't we record that?
Well, we have some good bits, and it's not
bits.
just you and I. It's usually a handful of people who stick around for the combo. So
That's true.
It's not just Chance and I being smart, because we're not that smart. So let's clear that up.
Good call. Good call. And so the first thing I wanted to touch on today, this is goes into leadership and a few other points here, but we were chatting one day about reputation and how, especially in the military, but in policing and a lot of more, I guess, physical natured jobs, your reputation is everything, right? And if you are a hard worker and you are looking for stuff to do all the time, then your reputation will precede you when you go to a new unit or you go to a new group, or even if you have a group of martial arts studios, right? And you're known as a really good dude that likes to train, and you go to another studio within the same group, your reputation will usually precede you. The problem with that is if you have a bad couple of days or a bad unit, or you get into a particularly bad situation, that can follow you too. And so my question really, I guess more of a statement than a question. Hey, Fran's here too. What's up, Fran?
Hey, sorry, I couldn't find the link.
No worries. It's all good. I was just talking about reputation and how
it's everything.
Everything, right? There you go. You just dove right into it. But the question I really had to ask is it really necessary? Is it something that we should be really pushing within the community, or do you think it is kind of more of a relic of a bygone era? What do you think, Alan? You're on the hot spot.
I have seen some people that over the years definitely have evolved to be phenomenal soldiers and operators. And not saying that they didn't start out that way, but you definitely didn't see them becoming themselves in that environment, in that trade, I guess, until later on. So, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're a shitbag, you're a shitbag. It doesn't matter what branch. It doesn't matter. There's always going to be shitbags in there, and there's always going to be people that you're going to make sure that you know, and because the shitbags are a liability, especially in this type of work. There's no room for that, and this is the main reason why the reputation is critical. People being able to trust you, clearing your corner, making it down, and doing it right. If you don't have that trust, the entire team starts to fall apart. So, yes, I do agree to an extent. There is those exceptions that you could have started out as a shitbag, or you could finish as a shitbag. I've actually seen that as well. Starting out great. The main thing that, in my perspective, is environment trumps will. So you do have that where you have a shitbag goes to a phenomenal team, and all of a sudden that person becomes phenomenal. But I also have seen it the other way. If it's someone in a leadership position and he had a very strong character, but ended up on a team with the leadership being a shitbag and everyone else following suit, they later on turned into that as well.
Yeah, I can see that happening. Fran or Seb, you got any thoughts on this?
Go ahead, Fran.
Lots of thoughts on this. I've seen, I've actually seen it where I've had guys who were really good became shitbags because of the environment and the people around them, and then turned it around. But it required kind of being called out on that. I do agree that environment is a lot of it. I mean, nobody wakes up every day and goes, I'm going to be a shitbag today. But by and large, I mean, there are people who do that, but they're malingerers, and we just have to do away with them from the beginning, right? But and it doesn't matter if you're in the military, it doesn't matter what your job is. Nobody's like waking up, getting in the car, can't wait to get to work and suck at what I do. Generally, everybody's like, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to do the best I can today, or at least I'm going to try. And then the environment that they're in says like, they're either going to be successful or not. So when I look at those types of situations, I'm looking at two things. Number one, is it a state or is it a trait? So meaning, is it a state? Is it the environment that they're in? So, maybe they're a good person. They're not that bad. They have some training, but what we're asking them to do right now is not in their wheelhouse. It's not their specialty. They're not that great at it. So can we change their state into something else where they're going to be successful? I talk to people, and I don't want to say I joke, but we'll have conversations all the time about, maybe we'll find an opportunity for this person to be successful somewhere else. It's just not going to be here with us, because what I need them to do, they can't get done the way I need it to be done. So that's the first question. The second question becomes, is it a trait? So if I've identified that it's not the state, they have the requisite training, they have what we need, but they're not getting it done. Well, now it's a trait. They're just not good at what they do. They're just not, they don't have the requisite skills. Either we can train them or we can't, right? That becomes now that kind of third question. Can I build this person's capability to have the traits I need? That's harder, right? That's harder because we now have to decide as the leader, is it worth our time? Can we invest time? Do we have the resources? Are we actually going to have an effect? I don't know. So that's kind of my thought process when I try to break that problem down. But also, to the point, sometimes, just people they're just not good. And we've made a mistake in hiring. We've made a mistake in recruiting. Doesn't mean they won't be great somewhere else, but we don't have the ability. We don't have the time to deal with them in that environment, nor can we invest in their ability to change their trait for what we need. And we just got to move on.
Yeah. I heard this when I was in school. One of the instructors was telling us that there are people that interview really well, and then they get to work and they're horrible because they know how to interview. They know the game and they can play that well. And then once they actually get there and start working, not so much. Seb, you got any thoughts on reputation?
Yeah, lots of good stuff being addressed here. And I think just to make a bit of a departure from what you said initially, speaking about physicality of the job, I don't think the physicality of the job has as much to do with that. I think we're talking about jobs that have the potential to kill you.
There you go. Thank you.
Which is a
good clarification. Yeah.
Which is a very different it's a very different operating environment, right? And therefore, and I mean, you can be in a sales team, for example, and not carry your weight at all, and the team will carry the weight, and you will almost go unnoticed aside from the people that actually work day to day with you. And the same can be said about a leader. If people are following you willingly in a job where you now life and death decisions are being made on account of the circumstances that you're faced with on the daily, your guys are not going to listen to you. They're just not. Whereas in a sales team, they'll just pick up the slack, right? And so what I like to tell people that haven't or are wanting to head in those types of jobs is simply this: do all the little things right. Because you said something about having a strong reputation and doing certain things and being switched on, and all of a sudden having an event that thrusted you in losing some of that trust from your peers and moving on to another place and bringing that along with you. Well, if you have consistently demonstrated competence, you are not worried about that, because little things and mistakes are going to happen, and people are quite forgiven. Whether not so forgiven about is either the lack of self-awareness, the lack of self-regulation, or simply you repeating the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah.
And so the rest of it, I think, was pretty much touched on.
Yeah. Shaun, you want to round us out?
Well, I'll make an effort, because there's some great stuff in there. And yeah, I think there was a comment that was posed. Yeah, I've got the notebook out and I'm taking notes. So that's a good idea on this panel, I think. My thought on reputation is this: it takes time. It takes years to develop a reputation. And reputation is only developed through consistency of effort and excellence of effort if your reputation that you're seeking is one of excellence. So your reputation is formed through your actions over a long period of time. Now, here's the trick. At any given moment, after all of those years of that body of work, if you do that one thing wrong, wow, your reputation will suffer. So maybe a decade of hard body of work, and then you do that one thing. Well, your reputation is going to suffer immensely, perhaps. So what do? Well, you got to fix it. You got to own it. You got to apologize. You got to do whatever it takes to make it right to the group that considers your reputation. And there's two reasons that you have to do that, because you got to stay on the righteous path, obviously. But to the next point, which is vouching, you can't vouch for anyone if you don't got a reputation. And if your reputation is bad, anything that you vouch for, it doesn't matter. It doesn't count for anything. Vouching isn't a thing that you should ever consider if your reputation sucks. So if your reputation was built over 20 years and it's still solid, and now you're vouching for people, that vouching can mean a 1 out of 10, or it can mean a 10 out of 10, depending on who's doing the vouching. So if I vouch for someone, I might be a 3 out of 10. If Seb vouches for someone, maybe it's a 6 out of 10 or whatever. The vouching power is as important as your reputation, in my opinion. So you always stay consistent, righteous, form a good reputation. But when you're handing out vouching for someone, you've also got to consider that as part of your reputation, because the moment that I put my name on someone, if they screw that up, I consider it to be now on me. It reflects on me and the poor choices that I've made in trying to put my name on someone. So your reputation is incredibly important, but so is your vouching as well.
Well, you got to know your source too. Think about, it's like what we talk about all the time, trust your source, know your source, right? If known shitbag says this guy's a good dude, we're going to think about that a little bit, right? If number 1 out of 100 says this person's a good person and we need to take them in, well, now we're going to put a little bit more weight on that.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole conversation came up because I was speaking with Shaun afterwards, one of the chats. I can't remember which one, and it was I was talking about when I got posted to a school after my time in the engineer regiment, where I got pretty bitter. I got pretty angry with the unit. I was under some bad leadership. I made a lot of mistakes, all kinds of stuff. I was always known as a good worker, though. If you needed something done, I was no problem. This guy has the skills. He'll make it a little hard on people, which I did. And then when I got posted to this school, a friend of mine was already there, and he said right off the bat, "This guy's solid. You show him a good leadership, and he'll follow suit." And when I did, I got there, and it was awesome. I had a blast, had good leadership, did great work. And to your point, Alan, you were saying that the environment says a lot. It really does, and you can go from being looked at poorly in one area to being looked at highly in another area, again based on your performance in that moment. But the that first interaction with people is tough, and we got a really good question on this from Winterstorm here. If your reputation is a byproduct of your actions and how others perceive them, which is more important? Anybody want to jump on that?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind taking a conch on this one.
Yeah.
For me, it absolutely is, and that is a critical piece, because if you are somehow trying to build your reputation, and this is the primary objective, you are going to do things that are going to affect that. It's kind of like focusing on outcome in trying to do something. So you're trying to say run a firearms qualification. If you start focusing on the outcome of you potentially passing or failing, you're going to start impacting the things that you do on the daily to make it work. So it's not about that. This is it should be, in my opinion, a secondary pursuit to the pursuit of excellence. Right. But also it's not an individual pursuit, and that if the sole concern of yours is to build your own reputation, how many people are you affected negatively along the way? Whereas if you're trying to bring up the collective and be the best version of yourself for the sake of everybody else, you're doing it correctly, and your reputation will be a byproduct of your actions.
That's a good point. Anybody else want to take a piece on that?
Sure, I'll give it a crack. I agree with Seb. I focus on my actions. Actually, I don't even think of them as actions. I just do me, but I do my best. And so hopefully my actions are solid and righteous and legit, because that's what I'm focusing on. And sometimes I don't always do it right, but if I do it wrong, then I correct that. And so I think that any reputation that I've got is a result of decades of work. But there's also a critical point, I believe, to focus on, and that is in how others perceive it. So there was a time when I didn't care what others thought. I just did my best, and they would either align with me or not. If they disliked me, I'd try to figure out why, but I'd still keep on crushing. But at some point, I think that whatever reputation you get in whatever position you find yourself in, if you are trying to lead at the front, I think there is an important consideration to shape the perception of others around you, so that not that they follow you like some sort of weird Pied Piper, but so that you get the best outcome for the group in a positive fashion with just a little bit of perception shaping. And it doesn't have to be some sort of using the dark force like you're Darth Vader. It can still be trying to do good. And I'm not talking about manipulating perception. I'm just talking about if someone's coming at you hard, like this just happened to me recently. If some hater comes at you hard and says that, hey, dude, you're only 3 foot tall and you never joined the army. All right. I got to shut that down, because if that perception spreads out that I'm only 3 foot tall, I'm actually 3 foot 1.5. Then,
I would have given you 3.2, but all right.
Like, how far do you let that spread to negatively impact all of your body of work, all of those good actions? How far do you let that spread to, if my reputation gets destroyed, that's less impactful than the goodness that is coming out of that reputation in respect to the group. I just think it's something that you got to keep an eye on as you become not more influential, but more inspiring. I don't know.
That's a good point. Fran, Alan, got any thoughts on reputation as a byproduct?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this. There, what's that saying? Perception is reality. So the actions that I do, if there's an intent behind it at any point in time, then it is. I don't want, excuse me, I don't want people to think of me as, do as I say, not as I do.
Mhm.
The most important leadership lessons I learned wasn't anything that was verbalized. It was, my team sergeant that was doing everything that he needed to do. As soon as he got done with it, he came and started helping us do the inventory. He didn't do anything between that. Got a call, he left. He went and did his thing, came back, kept helping us out. What that instilled in us was, I'm not too important for anything on my team.
Mhm.
I'm good. I'm going to continue doing what we need to do to get this accomplished. And I'm here with y'all without saying a word.
Yeah.
That was a big influence to me. This is something I still to this day try to do. Lead by example. It's been very successful for me in and out of the military. Never requiring anyone to do something I wouldn't do. I think that is very basic, very bottom line. It should be, at least. Because how do you expect anyone else to do something like, if you're not willing to do it yourself? If you're not willing to try that out and going through the pain, the suffering, how would you give that advice? I wouldn't take it seriously. But again, the perception of your actions should be what you're trying to convey without having to say anything, without having to defend it, without having. I understand what you were saying, but if that spreads out, I've never been the type to kind of defend myself on that. I always just, okay, you say whatever you want. My actions will actually show differently. In a small community, you can do that. Now, if you're like big army, yeah, I can see that. That's a whole nother story on that. But try to lead without saying anything, to me, has always been a lot more powerful than trying to yell it to someone.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Brand, you got points on this at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree very much with what he's just saying, because it's like, if you wake up every day and you walk in the room to your team or your company and you say, what do I need to do today to have a good reputation? Right? Like, people are going to see right through that.
Yeah.
You're fake. You're not authentic.
Retract that sentence is what you should do.
Yes, exactly. It's like when in my mind, it's like when people start, their LinkedIn post with, "I'm humbled to tell you," just say like, "Hey, today I'm the friggin' man," and like, that's it. Tomorrow I might not be, but right now I'm going to tell you some cool news about myself. Which should generally be the byproduct of the fact that they were doing the right thing, which is kind of my broader point, right? Like, your reputation is going to come from you just doing the right thing. We talked about his team sergeant coming in and doing the right thing, like, and I think we've all lived at points. I know I have, and I think we even talked about this, not too long ago. Like, I've lived my life where I've woken up and looked in the mirror and been like, I'm a really bad person. Like, and I might, and I don't know how I'm going to change that today. Like, I might not change that today, but like, there's when you can wake up and just say, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to do my best today and just try to do the right thing, do what's asked of me, do what I believe I need to do, and not try to think about like, if I do this, then that, if I do this, then that, that is where we fall into the downward spiral, because we're not making decisions for ourselves and our lives and our organizations that are in the best interest of what they may need from us. We're doing it because we think that if we're going to be looked at and perceived a certain way by taking a certain action. And most often that's actually going to work against us. At least I know in my life, I can look back and I can say, like, almost without fail, the times where I stood at the door and said, I'm going to do it this way because people are going to think this, I got humbled pretty quick.
Yeah, that's it does happen pretty fast like that when you start. And it's funny because when we all giggled when you said, I'm going to start off my day and just be like, how do I make this look good? Right.
Yeah.
But when you say it out
Says
loud,
every influencer on Instagram.
exactly, right?
Dude,
That's
it's
what it comes into.
rampant. It is rampant.
Don't get me started. Don't get me started.
Well, so this is the next question I had on this, is that, you know, reputation is huge, and being able to vouch for people is a big deal. And we've all, you know, been in various forms of leadership. You guys have been quite a bit higher than I am, but that's whatever. The thing that was always harped on us with this is that it's all on you, right? You're the leader. It's your responsibility. It's about if you have someone underneath you that is not performing, that's on you. If you have somebody that is, you know, is destroying their own reputation, or the reputation of the team, or the reputation of the people around you, et cetera, it's all on you, because you're the leader. But that only goes up to a point, right? If you are doing everything in your power to bring someone up, and they're self-sabotaging themselves, at least in my mind, there's a point where your leadership stops and their idiocy begins, kind of thing.
Does
Any
it
thoughts on
though? Does it
Yeah,
really?
I got to touch
it
on that
never
one too.
stops for me.
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, jump in here, Alan.
And so basically, the accountability is major. Right? We all agree on that. And you said to an extent. Can you elaborate what the extent where you said once they self-sabotage? So
yeah, basically, yeah. I was thinking more along the lines, if they were to go, like, for instance, I saw this a lot in my unit where somebody would get a DUI downtown, whatever, right? So private so-and-so goes downtown, gets drunk, gets in a fight, starts driving drunk. Well, unless you were physically there holding his hand, did you do everything and you could up until that point where you were, you know, you were talking about him, you didn't drive drunk, you were leading the example, you were doing everything you could, and then that person, of their own stupidity or short-sightedness or whatever, went over and aboard past what you said and self-sabotaged. Where does the leadership, where does that point stop?
Is he still in a unit?
He would still be in, technically, and now he's not, but he was at the time, yeah.
Okay, so after that, did you make the decision as a leader to remove him?
Well, he was my equal, so he was another corporal when it happened. So I wasn't in a position, but I'm just wondering your thoughts on it, because I have seen those situations happen where you can do everything you can up until a point, and then that person either doesn't take it upon themselves to accept that information, and then what?
At that point, though, your leadership, you're absolutely right, but it doesn't stop there. Your leadership is to remove that person from that situation at that point.
Okay.
So it's always going to be, if he's still there, it's your fault. You see what I mean? So if he doesn't know what he's doing, great. I'm going to teach you, and I'm going to stand over you. I'm going to micromanage until you say, you know what, I'm good. Then he's good. If he's still messing up, hey, what happened? Did you not understand that? Yes, I did understand that. Why didn't you get it done? Okay, I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind. So again, if I have to continue doing that, I'm keeping track of this. And so as it's taken away, you're not capable of doing this. Now it starts to eat up my time. That's when I have to end it. But it's always going to be on the leader to find that line, how far you're willing to go on it, and how far you're willing to keep that person, their value, what their worth is. So at the end of it all, if he's still doing any self-sabotaging and he's still here, then that's on you. That's you're still accountable.
Interesting.
But needs to leave, because now he's become toxic for everybody else.
That's a great point. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Anybody?
It can definitely impact you know, organizationally, it can impact it can impact the team, it can impact the outcome of a call later, and yes, you haven't relegated your duties as a leader in not addressing the things you should have been addressing, and often on account of the fact that it's uncomfortable to do it. It has to be done. That's part of your job, and yes, bringing somebody along is the way to go. But at the end of the day, they're grown adults and they have decisions to make. And if those decisions are not in line with the organizational value of what you guys are trying to achieve with a culture in your organization, then you need to address that. And I will go a step further and say I've seen it before, and I'm sure everybody here has as well, where somebody has a tracking history of certain behaviors that are not being addressed along the way, and one day it percolates operationally and creates a massive shitstorm. And now you start looking at, down the leadership pipe to see who addressed what and when and those types of things. Now, I'm not so concerned about like blame laying and those types of things, but think of yourself as the leader that's responsible for that person, and say the person continues on in the field of endeavor and they end up in some shitstorm where somebody gets hurt or killed or both. How are you as a leader now looking back at yourself and say, I did everything I could with that person to try to make that person what they needed to be, to provide them the support, to guide them, to mentor them, to do all this good stuff. But at the end of the day, I always knew he was a liability and I didn't do anything about it. Right. So now you're kind of, you're not only you or whoever was leading him is also, and theoretically partially responsible for that. So yeah, I totally in line with Alan on that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Fran, Shaun, either one of you guys want to jump in on this?
Go ahead,
No?
Shaun.
Sure thing. No problem. I'm trying to be a gracious co-host or whatever. I try not to be in front of the mic most of the time, but I find myself in it. So I will say this. Let's just all great answers, but I'm going to do it a little bit of a different way. It's all on you. What does that even mean? I mean, who are you and what is it? And so quickly to define it, let's pretend you're a leader. Now you've got a structure all around you. We'll call it a construct. And what does that mean? You've got resources, time and money, we'll call it, or we'll just call it time in the military. So you've only got so much time as a leader. And if your construct is only 4 inches around you versus 4 miles around you, those are two different kinds of roles and responsibilities. If you're looking after 3 guys or if you're looking after 3,000. So it's all on you. What does that mean for each different leader? And let's now step out of the army as an example. Maybe you're running the car dealership. You've got your feet up on the desk. You've got your hands behind your head. You're waiting for the 3 salesmen that work for you to do that thing. And you're now leading by putting your feet up on the desk. And then one of your salesmen does something wrong. And maybe you fix that, maybe you don't, depends on what kind of leader you are, but you're bored and you're drumming your fingers on the table and you're thinking, well, it's all on me, but I got some spare time. I'm going to go get up in someone else's business and cause all kinds of trouble. Now they're trying to lead other car dealerships. Oh, I heard about a guy over in the dealership across the street and blah, blah, blah. And so now it's all on you. You've got to figure out what it is and who you are and what you're looking after and what your roles and responsibilities and what your no cross the line in the sand is. Because if you think you're a great leader and you're going to fix all of those things, now you're dabbling in someone else's business. I mean, it can go sideways pretty quickly. So if you're a great leader and you just love the leading, mind your own business sometimes up to a point.
Yeah, but Shaun, for argument's sake, like this is a theoretical framework for leadership.
For
like,
sure. I'm trying to be careful.
Oh
and
yeah, for sure.
I love where you're going to take this.
For sure. Like the where you take and how you take actions as the leader is critical, right? Like a few things you mentioned that are really interesting. What if you lead 3 people and you lead 3,000? Well, that's why decentralized command is the way to go in a dynamic environment. You don't lead 3,000 people. You lead the 3 people that you lead. They lead 3 each.
If the leader understands that, that's right.
100%. So that's it. Like talking about culture, talking about the things that are critically important to wellness, talking about the things that are critically important for standard operating procedures and things that are dangerous and things that are potentially deadly. But you're not doing it by yourself. You have your team there, and you have not only your team of leaders, but you also have the buy-ins. You should have the buy-ins from the majority of your people, and everybody's kind of working on this together towards a common goal. It's not something you establish a vision and then you put the assets in positions to be able to reach that vision, but you're actually not monitoring everybody's micromanaging essentially micro action. So the it for me is about the culture. It's about the things that can kill you. It's about the, it's more of that than anything else. But I'm not doing it alone. Everybody's in it.
Mm. That's true.
But Chance,
Yes.
who had a friend called a corporal who got a DUI, was standing there next to his buddy, not knowing how to lead in that moment because he'd never been taught. And so the culture didn't exist. And so if the culture doesn't exist, there's just one dude with his feet up on a desk and his hands behind his head, wondering how he can dabble in someone else's business.
Sure.
So that is another possibility. If the culture existed where on a siloized basis from raw private all the way up to the top of the pyramid, the culture was lead by example, every single man, sort out the nonsense, take care of business, blah, 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 all of the fundamentals, then the DUI story wouldn't be a story. But it is because of ineffective leadership, ineffective culture, ineffective learnings.
Mm. That is a very good point. The culture in that unit was not great. So I'm not going to go too deep into that one because that would be a whole other story. Fran, you got any points on this before I push into this next thought?
I think that it comes down to identification of your place in the organization. And just because you're a leader, well, first of all, leaders exist at every point, every part of an organization, right? It doesn't mean that just because you have a title that starts with a C, that you're a leader and then everyone below you is a follower. I think everybody in every organization is a leader because when you, just as in your story here, when your time, you don't know when you may have to lead, and you may have to lead yourself. You might have to lead your boss. You might have to lead. It's called, we talk about meta leadership a lot. And what's meta leadership? It's the ability to lead up, down, across, and out, and beyond. And so leaders exist at all parts of the organization because there's going to be different environments and different times where they're going to have to stand up and take charge, take action, provide direction, and either push people or pull people to achieve the effect and the aim that they're out to do. But we have to identify that. We have to say, what is my role in this organization right now? It might be writ large. It might be today. It might be this month. It might be this project. But it's so important to understand where we fit in. How do we add value? What is being asked of us? And even if we're the person whose name goes on the signature line, it doesn't mean that we might be the person who's actually carrying the water on that every day. It might be us empowering and bringing resources to everybody else to do that. So that's where I try to start in these conversations. Really, really much. Really, it's really, really about what am I here to do in this organization, in this project right now to achieve the goal.
Yeah. Being present in the moment. I like it. We have a question on this, and it's pretty good. It goes in line with what we're talking about. Is we're all leaders now, right? We're all wandering around being leaders because we are trying to uphold an example of betterment, excellence, skill sets, whatever. And the question is, what are your thoughts on the terms influencer and or / thinker, inspirer, or as inspirer, I think is the term that Shaun likes to use instead of influencer, since y'all are on social media, and inevitably those terms may be thrown around now because it's true. Like, we're on social media right now. We're live from multiple locations across North America, and we're trying to bring light into certain areas. So we are leading the charge as per information. What are your thoughts on being an influencer or thinker, or the fact, what are your thoughts on the responsibilities of being an influencer? Let's put it that way.
I'll just get my position out of the way so everyone understands.
Jumping in on this right away.
Who's ever listened to me knows what I'm about to say. I can't stand influencers. Yeah, they're the devil, in my opinion.
Can you give me your actual definition of that first, though?
Sure thing, I will. So I'll define it by using two words: influencer and inspirer. They come from two different reasons of being. And an inspirer, in my opinion, which is what I'm trying to be, is just a dude doing his best. And if anyone finds a way to learn from what I'm trying to do, then I hope it's a benefit to them. Whereas an influencer is typically putting out a false set of goods in order to gain from whatever they're pitching. So again, loosely to call it, an influencer would be like a snake oil salesman, the Kim Kardashians of the world, which I don't care for. And then an inspirer is someone who I think, and I'm going to toss a name out there just to keep it simple, I consider Jocko Willink to be an inspirer, not an influencer. And so though he is influencing a broader social media platform, he's doing Jocko. He is simply inspiring by being an inspiring person rather than trying to influence the masses by a false set of goods. That's what my definition is.
There you go. Anybody else want to jump on this? Fran, I'm gonna throw you on the fire.
Yeah. I was pulling something up while you were. I was preparing myself for this one because I can go deep on this. So I hate the term influencer. I have this fight with my podcast team every day, including right before this phone call, where they tell me that you need to do things more like this guy. And I look at them and say, no, I'm not going to do that. Because that person, although they may have a massive following, is not respected in the communities that I believe we need to be respected in as thought leaders. There are 4 roles to a team. Okay. Thinker, promoter, coordinator, and action-oriented staff. Okay. And this comes from, I will not take credit for this. This comes from a guy by the name of Dr. Jack Stark. Jack Stark is a performance psychologist. He worked with Nebraska during Nebraska's heyday in college football, and he is the performance development coach for NASCAR for Hendricks Motorsports, and was there when they won 8 championships with Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson. Everyone.
So no big deal really at all.
No big deal. Just no big deal.
What does that dude know?
Right?
Yeah, he knows nothing. That's just so I actually told him this. But there are 4, but he's got this. So those are the 4 roles, right? Thinker, promoter, coordinator, action oriented staff. And nowhere there do you hear the term influencer. Okay, because as you were just saying, it's about promotion, but the thinker's job is to create that vision, right? You think about Steve Jobs. Okay, Steve Jobs' goal was to visualize success, understand the operating environment, craft that strategy, say this is where we have to go. But it takes then in an organization the promoter, the person who's going to stand up and rally the troops. It may not have been their great idea, maybe it was, but they're going to represent the organization. You talked about Jocko. Jocko's great at this. You know, I love Jocko, don't get me wrong. I want hate mail after this, but nothing that Jocko talks about is some wild idea that he came up with in the middle of the night and wrote down on a piece of paper and changed the world. These are principles of leadership that are used every single day in military and great organizations outside of the military. But he does a phenomenal job of tailoring those talking points to the everyday person and inspiring them and promoting them to get up and execute those things. And he's great at that. He aligns people to that mission. What's the coordinator's job? Someone's got to start to manage the work. Someone's got to look. We talked about teams. We talked about understanding your role. Someone has to align the people to the mission. So you have this visionary, you have this thinker who's like, I want to change the world. I think we're going to do it like this. Then you got the person who's standing up saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to rally the troops. We're going to get the support. And then you have the person who actually has to look internally and be like, how are we going to do this? What do we actually need? How are we going to arrange the team? What's the timeline? And then you have this action-oriented staff. They got to come together. They have to get the work done. In small organizations, you might look, I mean, I've spent a lot of time on my podcast and in my company, and all these roles were me. And you may start there, and that may be very real, but sometimes you have to figure out which one of those you have to be. Larger organizations, larger teams, it's very important to have this conversation, understand who's filling these roles. People who just get up and pontificate their nonsense all day long, hey, look, people make a lot of money. And I'm kind of jealous because they got like sick cars and yachts and boats. And I wish I could do it. But like, you know, think about where you're taking the, how are you advancing society, and what's the true impact that you're having? Because eventually, your mouthpiece is going to run dry, and you're going to go away.
Yeah. Alan or Seb, you got any thoughts on this? So many. I'm going to throw you on the fire, Alan.
So, I mean, I've had this conversation several times. One of the big things that comes up is, and I wish you want to use that example, man. But if you talk about like the Kim Kardashians, right? And someone does better themselves from watching that
distasteful just to talk about it.
It just honestly, the fact that Carl Sagan only got a few seasons and they've been on for 13 years,
it's mind blowing, right? Oh man,
it gives you a very good indication where we are as a society, and all the nonsense that goes along with it. But I'm trying to be fair on this and give the other side. If they do gain something out of it, are they now inspire to them, to that crowd, but not to you? Is it just subjective opinion onto that? And Fran, I went to one of Jocko's echelon fronts, and
there
was a lot of great things that he was able to put together with it. But in between that, that role that you were discussing about bringing the people together, and again, I'm not saying, it's hard to say this. I'm trying to say this in the most neutral sense possible, but there were ads in every other break about camps, the Jocko Fuel, the other seminars that they have going. And so there still is that, because there has to be, and I got to be fair about that, because if you're going to make money, you have to sell the product. He's selling, he was selling the podcast by putting bits of the podcast in with the presentation. He was selling parts of the camp, because he was putting that as part of the presentation as a segue, and this is a good idea for that. I think you have to, at a certain point, you just can't avoid it, because how are you going to quietly promote a product that you're trying to get out there? And then it also comes to, what about if you truly, honestly believe that your product is going to better people's lives? Then we can use that same argument to essential oils. Some people are going to get some benefit out of it. I'm just playing devil's advocate on it. I mean, you're just replacing the word snake with essential, and you got the same thing. But you still have people that will, and a large, I wouldn't say majority, but a very large part of the population would believe in a lot of these things just because one of those people said that it worked. I mean, that's the whole, it's a mad circle.
Yeah.
I've had this conversation before. I've seen both sides. It just becomes one of those subjective things where, someone's seeing freedom of expression, the other person seeing bad influence on children of today.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely one, it has to be isolated to be able to give like a fair shot at being able to distinguish what it's doing. Of course, if you have like some white nationalist racist that is promoting ideas on that, yes, it's going to benefit that population only, but in the grand scheme of things, for the rest of society, it's going to be negative. Should we judge it based on that? Or this is where that it's the free speech of these things, when we're talking about this, is actually what I think is kind of like the bottom line of all this. How much are you willing to say, or willing to say, able to say, would say, if you knew what you said and the responses and the after effects are going to influence what you're trying to sell?
I think at an elemental level, the difference between Kim Kardashian and Jocko Willink is one is trying to be righteous, and the other one doesn't care where it all goes. So if the luxury yacht goes right off the cliff of the Kardashian episode 27 or whatever the case is, that ain't Jocko. He ain't leading people off a cliff. He's trying to do good in the world. And to your point, Alan, and I totally get what you're saying. It's a tricky balance. And I don't know if anybody's doing it right. I don't know if anyone ever gets the perfect balance on how to do any of life. But I do know at an elemental level, you're either trying to do it righteously or you're trying to take advantage of the system. And I think at a basic level, that's kind of where my head is at.
It really does depend on what the intention is, right? And I've said this before on my podcast and a bunch of other stuff, is that we're all really just kind of swinging in the dark, right? Like none of us really know what the right direction is. We believe what the right direction is as per, what we've experienced and what we've seen and the examples that we've been provided with. And, but again, if you're just swinging in the dark and you have no experience in any other way, and somebody says, hey, these crystals work and they help you and they'll so on and so forth, and you believe that wholeheartedly, and you get some betterment from it, well, okay, sure. I mean, so I see what your point there, Alan, is that where does the line of responsibility come in? And it actually goes back to my question earlier when I was like, it's all on you up to a point. Is that, what is your actual intention? Because all leadership is manipulation. You are trying to manipulate people into doing what it is you want. Now, what is your intention with that? Is it a noble intention? Is it a righteous intention? Is it mission oriented? Is it whatever? We could go into that for quite some time, but I think what we're all saying here is, what is your intention? Do you want betterment for people around you or not?
Well, Eric Lister put in the chat here in the comments, and he's spot on that trashy gossip content scales more than deep, complex thought and exploration on the viewing platform. I mean, this is true. I mean, that's so the reality. True. And so, that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, when we have to make decisions as to like what we're going to talk about. What do we want to talk about? Jocko talks about thought leadership. I talk about thought leadership. I studied journalism in a day when you had objective journalism, and objective journalism by and large doesn't exist today. But I don't want to bring people on my show and back them into a corner to get them to say some crazy soundbite that I'm going to cut 2 seconds of and put across the internet to make it seem like it was something wild. We want to have like real, and I want my audience to be, and I don't want people who want shock jock journalism and want crazy things. I want people who to be aligned to our mission of real thought leadership, bettering those who want to take the next step in their professional development, building great teams and organizations that start with the individual, because it is on you. You make the decision to increase your life and your capability in life. That's where it starts. And that's who I want to surround myself with. And that might be a much smaller audience than Kim Kardashian. Well, I won't say it might. It is a much smaller audience than what Kim Kardashian or someone else is going to get. But and that's okay. And we have to be okay with that and understand that. Do I look at myself in the mirror every day and say, I'm happy with who I am and what I talk about and what I did today? And if you are, and if you talk about gossip and all these crazy things, and you're able to do that and you have a massive audience, awesome. Good on you. It's not what I want. It's not who I am.
Yeah.
There's a certain self-righteousness no, I don't intend this to be for anybody to wear, but there's a certain self-righteousness, I think, inherent to humans, where somehow the actions of somebody else are interpreted through my lens in relation to how it either makes me feel or it changes what I do. And for me, I'm very careful with that because, and just to take Sean's example earlier, for example, like Kim Kardashian, do we actually know what her intent, what her intentions are, or how she deeply feels about social issues, or how does she feel about the impact that she's having in the world, and how does she, you know, all those things. There's a lot of assumptions here. Like, we don't know. We don't. What we do know is, yes, there was some privilege there, and yes, you know, many people can say the same, and not many to her extent, but to a certain extent. And so, at the end of the day, for me, I'm very careful with two things: a, semantics, because really we can argue the terms until we're blue in the face. I mean, terms are used by the people doing it. They're generally used by others to describe them, right? So I don't like the term myself personally, but it doesn't change the fact that from a theoretical standpoint, it actually does make sense. If it influences people, why wouldn't it not be called an influencer? But I also don't like the term just because of the social implications that we attach to it. But I, you know, just be very, very careful of who we paint in what corner and what they do and how they do it. And oftentimes the people that are doing that are actually not really researching the people they're talking about, right? So we're proliferating um, a way of shutting people down or polarizing, which is something that we should strive not to do. And we've seen where this brought us during the pandemic, and so on. So yeah, just some critical thinking. And also one of the other piece that really bugs me is the fact that really there is no real data analysis that we can, we can do. Everything is mostly anecdotal when it comes to influencing and how much impact somebody has on some people, and how much good versus how much bad. And we can throw all kinds of names in the mix, the Jordan Peterson of this world, or whoever, right? Joe Rogan, or name him. I mean, how do we actually empirically, sort of keep track and have a decent argument based on data collection? And we don't have that, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult to do that. But also, it's very difficult to prove that you love your daughter. It's very difficult to prove the crimes that haven't happened because you were there. It's really, and so, anyways, just food for thoughts as far as I'm concerned here.
Can I throw something out real quick? And it's
absolutely.
purely coincidental. I'm working on a book called, I'm reading Patty Main right now.
Yeah.
And it's, of course, anyone who knows anything about the formation of the British SAS, they will know who Patty Main is. So just a random page that I was reading this morning, and I highlighted. I actually threw it up on my Instagram stories, not because I knew what we were going to be talking about today. Again, purely coincidental. So Patty Main did very little writing in his journal, but the stuff that he did write, I think it's pretty powerful. And when I think of influencers versus inspirers, a guy like Patty Main inspires me. And a guy like Patty Main will last through eternity because of the things that he did and the things that he said and the actions that he formed. So I'll just read what he says. The qualities that he felt were important in a leader are integrity, self-confidence, sensitivity for concerns of others, flexibility of thinking, and the confidence to trust others' judgment. Patty Main, then went on to make a brief contrast with David Sterling, who, of course, was one of the other officers who helped form up the SAS. He noted that perhaps one of the very few records there are of Main's opinions on Sterling were as such. Main felt that Sterling's most powerful attribute was the ability to make you think that you are a most important person. Sterling was a master of that art, and it got him good results. Now, why I thought that is because of Seb. He's actually a bit of a master of it himself, because he, using myself as an example, convinced me that he valued me enough or made me feel important enough to do what I'm doing right now. And so he'd be David Sterling in my world, Seb would be. And so I think that I understand that he was able to do that because I respected him for all of the right reasons, because he's a righteous dude. But if Kim Kardashian rolled up on me and tried to get me to do something, it wouldn't go as well. And so, like, I don't want to throw her under the bus. I guess I am, but I'm using her as, we'll call her as an avatar. The difference between the Seb avatar and the Kim avatar are radically different. And I know that Seb knows how to lead. He has the same sort of values that I have. And so he resonates with me as a leader, whereas Kim Kardashian doesn't.
Sure, but when you and I met initially, Shaun, you self-admittedly you've said it's taken a week for me to realize that we had all this stuff in common, that we had
Sure.
similar views and values, and so you've invested time in getting to know me until you were able to form that opinion. You couldn't have formed that opinion at face value, and you can't with her, right? And so, anyways,
Yeah.
for me, it's all
Some
about
casual observations.
yeah,
sure,
for sure. I'm not a big fan, and I don't feel, and I'm not saying that this is what you are doing here, but I'm not a big fan when humans are somehow maybe on a subconscious level trying to make their position more important on account of somebody that they perceive to be lesser or
Oh, I see where
you know
you're
what
going.
you know what I
I'm
mean?
totally not into that. Yeah.
Basically discounting somebody's life that you don't know, and be like, okay, that person has ill intent. They there's no direction. They're not aware of their social implications of their influence on people. All of those are assumptions. Like we can't verify that. Right. And it just sucks if you're that person on the other end of this, trying to do good and it's just being discounted. Anyways, that was just, being devil's advocate.
I love it, man. This
That's
is
fair.
why
That's
we have
fair.
these
Yeah.
conversations. This is the whole reason. And I love the fact that we're getting a really balanced view from, hard chargers down the line, where somebody might look at the four of you guys and go, well, I think I know how they think. But we had a very, very balanced view on a lot of this that is outstanding. So first off, I just want to thank all of you guys for being here, because this was fantastic. I had a fantastic time listening to y'all. This has been I've been taking notes. Yeah, just so you guys know, I got notes down here. We have some other great questions. I'm gonna put one comment on here before we shut her down and get some final thoughts. But I just love this point. I believe the influencer would be the same person who would self-label themselves as the idea guy in team projects. They say they will think outside the box, but not really contribute. Big words only. And those idea people, as you were saying, Fran, those are needed. Those are absolutely needed. You need those people to come up with those ideas that are outside the box that other people wouldn't find. But you need the team. You need everybody working together towards that goal for that to really come out. But yeah, I just that's fantastic. Fantastic thoughts. Fantastic interaction from the crowd. Any final thoughts on leadership, on reputation, on stuff being up all on you? Anything you want to part ways with? Anything? Alan, I'm going to throw you on the fire. Haha.
Again.
You can take it.
That is a deep rabbit hole, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're just scratching the surface of everything right now.
I mean, I was literally about to follow back up with Seb. Give the example of Dan Bilzerian at his height. It was people like, well, I'll listen to Jocko sometimes, but I'll listen to Dan Bilzerian because he was a SEAL too. Now, just really quick on that. That was flash people that actually knew that he was full of shit from the very get-go. And I mean, from the very get-go, nobody cared. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
But you have those situations that you have to deal with as well, and those are common. But like what Fran said about the team, now that can be organized to whatever your objective is. So if it is to collect money, to scam people, you have that same idea. But if you have it with the principles within that team of the integrity, what we're actually trying to do for the good of betterment of society, you get that you have that much more of that platform that you can get out to people.
Yeah. Fran, you got some final points before we shut her down?
Always. I think that what I take away from this, the big theme is, if you're thinking about, if we're consistently thinking about how we look because of our actions will be misguided and misplaced. Okay. And Winter Storm 427 asked the question here: who places the term influencer on someone, the person or the audience? I would tie that back into everything we talked about.
Yep.
If I wake up and say to myself, I'm an influencer, no, I'm not. I'm a piece of shit.
I'm an alpha male.
So I'm a dirtbag. If I wake up and I do the right thing every single day, and somebody wakes up and says that person influences me, or they inspire me, or whatever, they promote it, and whatever it is, that label that they put on me, because of the actions that I'm taking every day to do the work that I think is important, well, then I can go to sleep at night and feel pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Seb or Shaun, you got any final words? Seb, I'm going to throw you on the fire now.
Yeah, I'm not following that friggin' mic drop. That was excellent.
No, you got nothing? Okay. Shaun,
I got nothing to say.
Okay. Shaun, what do you got?
Yeah, and all I was going to say is I agree with Fran.
Yeah. That was a mic drop. The funny thing is, I bug Shaun about this all the time because he's got that boom arm, and every time he drops a statement like that, he just kind of like flicks the mic across him. And I'm like, you need to actually be able to drop. There you go. He's got the toss of it there.
It's an expensive drop, though. You can't
right?
do it.
No, it would be a little challenging.
Listen, if it changed people's lives, I'd drop this mic as often as I could and pay the price every single time. Whatever money I got to spend to change people's lives for the good, then I'm willing to pay that price.
There you go. And I can't thank y'all enough for being here. This has been a fantastic conversation. I know I have learned. I know all the people watching have learned, and I know the panel here has learned. We've all learned so much. We've all grown. We've all built a better relationship together, and that's what the collective's all about: is learning, building, growing together. So thank y'all. We'll see y'all tomorrow, I guess. Have a great night. Chimo.